What if the children at the center of one of the world's most explosive royal controversies never actually existed? No, that's not a tabloid headline. That's the whispered question now ricocheting through royal circles. A question King Charles himself may have just answered without saying a word. Because in a shocking turn of events, the palace has officially confirmed that Archie and Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor have been stripped of all royal titles and privileges. Gone. Wiped clean. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And the reason? That's where things get disturbing. Not scandalous in the usual royal sense. Not an issue of protocol or petty family feuds. This time, it's something far more unthinkable. A slow-burning suspicion that's been quietly festering for years. A theory dismissed as a fringe conspiracy until now. What if there was never any official proof these children existed in the way we were told? Let that sink in for a second. No hospital confirmation. No doctor testimony. No witnesses at the alleged births. Just staged photos. Carefully scripted interviews. Netflix documentaries showing no genuine, unedited interactions. Royal insiders who nervously deflect questions. And now, the King of England making a chilling decision that seems to say, it's all true. Because in the history of the British monarchy, titles aren't stripped for nothing. Especially not from children. Especially not from the grandchildren of the sovereign. And yet here we are. So what really just happened? What caused King Charles, a man known for his caution, his diplomacy, his obsession with royal image, to draw the sword and cut off Archie and Lilibet, not just from titles, but from everything? What did the palace find? What truth have they been sitting on since before the Queen's death? And why now? You're going to hear all of it, step by step. This is a story laced with deception, whispers of DNA tests, and secret documents buried in royal vaults. We'll pull apart the staged baby photo that experts say was photoshopped. We'll examine the bizarre inconsistencies in the Netflix docuseries that raised more questions than answers. And we'll walk through the chilling moment when an Australian media outlet accidentally aired a clip that may have shown the wrong baby. But first, let's go back to the moment the palace made the announcement. Because that's where everything changed. The statement dropped quietly. No press conference. No fanfare. Just a short paragraph tucked into the royal website's official bulletin. It didn't even use their names at first, just referred to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's children. It read, "The children of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will no longer carry the courtesy titles associated with royal lineage. Adjustments to formal styling and privileges are now in effect." That's it. No further explanation. No justification. No offer to clarify. And yet, the implications were nuclear. Because until that moment, no matter how estranged Harry and Meghan were from the royal family, their children still held titles. Not formal HRH status, but prince and princess as grandchildren of the reigning monarch. It's automatic by tradition. It's cemented in royal law, unless something disqualifies them. So what could possibly disqualify children born of a prince? There are only a few possibilities, and each one is darker than the last. Let's address the elephant in the room. The wild theory that Archie and Lilibet aren't Harry's biological children. Or worse, that they were never born at all. Too outrageous? Maybe. But the questions began piling up from day one. Remember when Meghan gave birth to Archie in 2019? No hospital photos. No baby being carried out of the Lindo wing like Diana did. Like Kate did, 3 times. Meghan and Harry appeared 2 days later for a highly controlled photo op in Windsor Castle's St. George's Hall. The lighting was strange. The baby was wrapped so tightly no one could see his face. He was asleep the entire time. No hospital staff was interviewed. No official witnesses were named. Just silence. And then, the name. Archie Harrison. No royal name. No nod to tradition. No George. No Philip. No Edward. Just a Hollywood-sounding moniker with a middle name that literally meant son of Harry. As if the name was the only thing tying the baby to his father. Then came Lillibet. Born in the U.S. supposedly in Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, though the hospital has never officially confirmed it. A birth certificate did surface. But it had a bizarre signature line where Meghan used Duchess of Sussex as her surname. And unlike Archie's certificate, Harry's occupation was completely removed. Why? If you're starting to feel uneasy, you're not alone. Because for years, Palace watchers and royal correspondents tried to make sense of the secrecy, the layers of control, the weird inconsistencies. But every time someone raised a question, Meghan's PR team pushed back hard. And yet, the questions kept multiplying. Why were Archie and Lilibet rarely seen? Why were all the released photos overproduced, often blurry, or angled to obscure the children's faces? Why did the Netflix documentary, touted as their most personal project ever, show almost zero organic footage of the children interacting with their parents? And why, despite being 7th and 8th in line to the throne, were the kids never included in any official family portraits? Not even the late Queen's final Jubilee photos? Why weren't they photographed meeting their great-grandmother? It was all building to something. And apparently, King Charles had enough. Behind the scenes, sources now claim the palace conducted a quiet internal investigation, one triggered by a growing number of private complaints from other royal family members. Princess and allegedly raised concerns in 2022, just months before the Queen's death. Camilla reportedly called the situation a dangerous distraction. Even William, ever diplomatic, was said to be urging clarity. Then, there were the legal pressures. According to one former aide, the palace was increasingly worried about future lawsuits. Not from Meghan, but from others. What if questions about lineage spiraled into legal claims? What if foreign governments demanded proof of succession legitimacy? What if tabloids uncovered the truth before the monarchy could control the narrative? So, a decision was made. Charles waited until the Queen had passed. He waited through the coronation. He waited through a year of silence. And then, when the moment was right, he pulled the plug. With that short, icy statement, the monarchy effectively erased Archie and Lilibet from the royal framework. No royal titles, no HRH styling, no protection, no constitutional relevance. Gone. And yet, no one is saying why. Which is why the public is speculating wildly. And why this story matters more than ever. Because if it's true that Archie and Lilibet were never properly verified, that their births were shrouded in smoke and mirrors, then this isn't just a scandal. It's a potential constitutional crisis. The royal line of succession could be compromised. The future of the monarchy, already shaky in a modern world, could be permanently tainted. And the man tasked with stabilizing the crown, King Charles, may have just admitted, silently but clearly, that the lie could no longer be protected. But here's the catch. This rabbit hole goes much deeper than one statement. Because what came before the title stripping was a breadcrumb trail of whispers, documents, digital anomalies, and strange behaviors that now seem like red flags. And what's coming after this announcement may include legal battles, exposed footage, whistleblowers, and, if rumors are to be believed, a leaked DNA result that could set everything on fire. You're about to hear all of it. Because in this expose, we're pulling apart the entire narrative the Sussexes built around their children. We'll investigate the inconsistencies. We'll confront the contradictions. And we'll lay out the shocking evidence that may finally explain why the palace chose now, after years of silence, to erase Archie and Lilibet. But first, we need to go back to the exact moment this unraveling began. Because before the Netflix deal, before the Spotify disaster, before the Oprah interview, there was one royal statement that quietly questioned the legitimacy of Meghan and Harry's children, and no one noticed. Until now. Why would a king, especially one as image-conscious, calculated, and steeped in centuries of tradition as King Charles, choose to quietly strip his own grandchildren of their royal titles, without even naming them? That's the question that sent royal insiders, historians, and conspiracy theorists spiraling into overdrive. Because the move was unprecedented. But even more disturbing than what Charles said was what he didn't. No context, no reasoning, no emotion, just a cold, concise, palace-issued line that appeared without fanfare. No press conference, no televised address, no softening language like "after much consideration" or "in light of recent events." Just a sterile, legalistic, almost surgical purge of Archie and Lilibet from the royal record. It was as if someone wanted them erased, not punished. And it raised a bigger question. Was this about defiance or deletion? Let's break down what actually happened, word by word. The statement, posted briefly on the official royal.uk domain before being picked up by international media, read, The children of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will no longer carry the courtesy titles associated with royal lineage. Adjustments to formal styling and privileges are now in effect. It didn't say Archie or Lilibet. It didn't say prince or princess. It didn't offer thanks or express regret. It didn't blame Meghan or Harry. It just erased the children's royal identity in one breathless paragraph. And within hours, the media blackout shattered. Sky News ran a quiet segment late in the evening. The Daily Mail cautiously headlined, "Palace confirms changes in royal titles for Sussex children." But the real explosion happened online. Twitter/X, TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube were ablaze with one central reaction. What the hell just happened? And what are they not telling us? Because make no mistake, the British monarchy never makes this kind of decision lightly. Royal titles are more than just ceremonial flair. They're legal and symbolic indicators of status, bloodline, and succession. They're tied to constitution, security, global protocol, and international diplomacy. Stripping a child of their title, let alone two, is more than a family squabble. It's a royal declaration. But here's where it gets dark. This wasn't the first time the palace had considered making a move like this. According to several sources close to Clarence House, discussions about Archie and Lilibet's standing had been quietly circulating since 2020, right around the time Harry and Meghan formally stepped down as working royals. But back then, Charles had hesitated. He didn't want to escalate tensions. He didn't want to be seen as punishing innocent children. And he certainly didn't want to fuel the already raging fire that the Oprah interview and Sussex departure had created. So why now? Why, 3 years later, did he suddenly choose this moment to issue the order? Sources suggest that the catalyst was internal. Not public pressure, not press speculation, but a series of troubling briefings from within the palace, and one deeply buried report that had been locked away since the Queen's final year. A document, allegedly prepared by the late monarch's private secretary, contained a list of pending inquiries, items Her Majesty had requested be resolved discreetly before or after her passing. At the top of that list, clarification of lineage, Sussex offspring. That phrase, vague, chilling, almost clinical, is said to have triggered a full-scale reassessment within the royal household. Not because the palace wanted to attack Meghan or humiliate Harry, but because they needed to protect the line of succession. And Archie and Lilibet, technically, were sitting in the top 10. Let that sink in. If, at any point, their legitimacy was called into question by a hostile government, a constitutional crisis could erupt. If a foreign court requested proof of birth, paternity, or succession rights, and the palace couldn't provide it could destabilize centuries of monarchy. So rather than risk it, Charles cut the cord. A senior royal source, speaking on condition of anonymity, allegedly told one BBC reporter, "The king had to protect the institution. He doesn't want drama, but he also doesn't want fiction in the line of succession." Fiction. That word wasn't chosen lightly, because the more people began digging into the timeline, the absence of official medical records, the inconsistencies in birth certificates, the lack of public appearances, the contradictions in Netflix's documentary, the more the public started to entertain the unthinkable. What if Archie and Lilibet were never born to Meghan in the way we were led to believe? Now, we're not saying they don't exist. But what if the narrative, the romantic, fairy tale, mixed-race modern royal family image that Meghan and Harry so heavily marketed, was built on half-truths? What if the pregnancies were faked? What if surrogates were used, but concealed? What if the photos were staged, the footage doctored, the story crafted? And what if the palace knew all along, but kept quiet? After all, silence was the Queen's favorite tactic. The infamous royal motto has always been, never complain, never explain. But that approach may have backfired, because by refusing to address the swirling rumors early, by allowing Meghan and Harry to control the story with selective interviews and emotional documentaries, the palace lost the ability to steer the public's trust. And now, it seems King Charles is trying to take it back. Let's talk tone. The official statement wasn't just cold, it was surgical, almost legalistic. It referred to courtesy titles, a rare phrase used when titles are given out of royal tradition, but not guaranteed by law. This implies that the palace no longer recognizes Archie and Lilibet as legal heirs in the full sense of the word. That's huge. It suggests that behind the scenes, lawyers were consulted, advisors were briefed, and a final decision was made not just by the king, but likely with constitutional experts, senior courtiers, and possibly even MI5. And remember, this wasn't some vengeful act done in anger. It was quiet, deliberate, almost surgical. No slander, no smear, just deletion. Which brings us to the next disturbing wrinkle. The update didn't just remove titles. According to a quiet update on the royal family's official website, Archie and Lilibet were also removed from certain sections of the succession page, with no explanation. Previously, both children were listed with corresponding birth dates, title projections, and public service status. That entire section? Gone. No trace. And when asked for comment, Buckingham Palace said only this: "We do not comment on matters pertaining to the private status of minor family members." Private status? This is the line of succession we're talking about. Not private drama. Not family squabbles. Constitutional legitimacy. Diplomatic recognition. Historical continuity. So why the vagueness? Why the secrecy? Why now? Some believe it's because the palace expects fallout. Legal, emotional, reputational. They know this is just the beginning. That Meghan and Harry won't stay silent. That U.S. media will weaponize the narrative. That lawsuits may follow. Others believe Charles issued the statement now precisely because Meghan and Harry were gearing up for another media rollout, and he wanted to get ahead of it. Because if a new Netflix project, book, or interview was about to air that included the children as active royals, the monarchy would have a serious PR crisis on its hands. But what really caught the attention of analysts was the way the palace framed the decision as effective immediately. That phrase, standard in legal documents, usually implies that all previous statuses have been invalidated, retroactively, which could mean that the children's brief time as prince and princess is now not only revoked, but officially recognized as never having been legitimate to begin with. That's earth-shattering. It would mean that from the palace's point of view, Archie and Lilibet were never real royals. Not for a moment. Not on paper. Not in history. And if that's the case, what comes next? Will they be quietly removed from royal portraits, documents, publications? Will Harry fight back? Will Meghan go public with her version? Or will the palace unleash something bigger? Because whispers are already spreading about a document, one hidden deep within the Queen's vault, that allegedly outlines the exact reason this decision was made. A document that includes testimony, correspondence, and perhaps even medical files. And if that document ever leaks, it won't just blow up the royal family. It will shatter the global image of the Sussexes forever. But what came next was even more shocking. Because as this statement hit the press, one voice emerged from the shadows, a royal aide who had been there at the very beginning. One who had seen the original birth announcement drafts. One who knew the truth about the day Archie was supposedly born. And they were ready to speak. What if the story was never solid to begin with? What if, from the very moment baby Alexander was introduced to the world, something already felt off? Let's rewind. Not to the public statement, not to the Netflix special, not even to the Oprah interview. Let's go all the way back, to the first moment the palace claimed the Duke and Duchess of Calderon had become parents. No witnesses, no hospital photo op, no royal fanfare. Just a tightly staged, dimly lit photo session 2 days after the supposed birth, inside a narrow corridor of Eastmere Castle. The infant's face, mostly obscured by a hat and swaddling. The Duchess, smiling but distant. The Duke, awkward, shuffling, clearly reading from a rehearsed script. Even the lighting felt off. Too cold, too sterile. And that's when the questions began. Some whispered, some typed in the dark corners of royal forums. Some dismissed outright by major networks. But the pattern was there, quiet doubts mutating into deeper suspicion. Here's the thing. With every other royal birth before this, there had been a protocol, a system, a tradition so well practiced it was practically choreography. Princess Amelia, born at St. Luke's Wing. Public confirmation within 3 hours. Photos with the proud parents on the hospital steps, beaming, exhausted, real. Prince Edward's triplets? A media frenzy, 3 car seats, a press conference, even a nod from the Prime Minister. But baby Alexander? No hospital name was confirmed. No OBGYN came forward to offer a statement. No nurses were seen escorting the royal couple. Nothing. And yet the media was expected to accept it. No questions asked. Now here's where it gets interesting. According to one ex-palace aide, a draft press release had been prepared a week before the birth. But it didn't match the final version. The draft said, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Calderon has safely delivered a son at St. Luke's maternity wing, attended by Dr. Harriet Bremer and her team. But the final statement? The Duke and Duchess are delighted to announce the arrival of their son, Alexander, born safely earlier this week. They thank the public for their well wishes. No mention of location. No medical professionals. No details. Just a soft blur of vagueness. That draft was leaked months later, anonymously, of course. But it reignited the questions. Why would the palace pre-write a statement with such specificity, only to redact it? Now pause. Ask yourself, have you ever seen a royal family, any royal family, go to such lengths to hide the details of a royal birth? You might think, maybe they wanted privacy. But this wasn't privacy. This was secrecy. A sharp, tactical, uncomfortable silence that spread into every part of the story. Even Alexander's christening was strange. Traditionally, royal christenings are well-documented affairs. Press photographers line up. The Archbishop's presence is highlighted. Family members gather, tight smiles, rehearsed greetings, historical robes. But this one? No media allowed. No group photo. Just one grainy image released 3 days later, in black and white. And once again, the baby's face was turned away. Even stranger? The godparents were never named. That has never happened in modern royal history. Not once. The godparents are usually carefully chosen, prominent aristocrats, family allies, political influencers. Naming them isn't just a tradition. It's a public show of trust and future legacy. But this time, nothing. Not even speculation. Palace press officers refused to answer questions. They cited private family matters and shut down inquiries with icy precision. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe they just wanted a quiet life. Maybe this royal couple wasn't into publicity. But then came the contradiction. Because weeks later, the same couple who claimed to want privacy released a heavily edited, slow-motion montage of family moments featuring Alexander on a global streaming platform. The music? Emotional piano swells. The scenes? Soft-focus baby toes, blurry backyard giggles, birthday balloons drifting in golden light. But here's the kicker. In every single shot, the baby's face was either blurred, turned, or cropped out. And that's when digital forensic experts got involved. A small team of volunteer analysts, the kind who usually investigate CGI hoaxes and deepfakes, began comparing frames from the montage. Their conclusion? Some scenes may have been digitally manipulated. At least 2 sequences showed light-shadow discrepancies. The angle of the baby's shadow didn't match the shadows of surrounding objects. Another scene showed a baby being held by the Duchess, but the hand positioning was off. One frame showed the baby's head shifting unnaturally, almost like a digital overlay. Could it have been editing for privacy? Sure. That's what the palace claimed when questioned, although they never officially acknowledged the footage had been altered. But ask yourself, why release the footage at all if it required that level of manipulation? The answer, according to one royal insider, may lie in narrative control. The Duke and Duchess of Calderon, despite stepping back from active royal duties, had launched their own media brand, a production company, a podcast series, and a lucrative deal with a streaming giant. And central to that brand, their family, their story, their children. The more emotional the content, the more valuable the clicks. But the moment you turn your children into a brand asset, questions of authenticity follow. Let's jump forward a bit to baby Leora, Alexander's sister. Her birth was even more mysterious. Allegedly born in a private American clinic, Leora was introduced via a press release and a blurry photo taken in a garden. No confirmation from the clinic. No photos of the couple arriving or leaving. No video. Just one quote. "We feel blessed to welcome our daughter, Leora Rose, named in honor of her great-grandmother." A beautiful sentiment. But once again, no witnesses, no documents, no medical confirmations. And the photos? Same pattern. Angled, obscured, heavily edited. Some showed lighting inconsistencies so extreme that lighting experts claimed it was likely shot in a studio, not outdoors. Then came the leaked metadata. In 2023, a curious Reddit user dug into the code of one of the family's publicly released photos and found a geotag not in Santa Barbara, where the family claimed to reside, but in a small commercial studio in Burbank. That post was taken down within hours, but the screenshots spread. And suddenly, the questions weren't just from trolls and tabloids. Respected journalists, documentary makers, even ex-royal correspondents began sniffing around. Because a pattern had formed. No confirmation of births. No unedited photos. No official witnesses. Digital inconsistencies. Strategic media releases. Unwillingness to answer basic lineage questions. And all of it, carefully packaged in a narrative of victimhood. Whenever questions were raised, the couple's press team labeled them as racist, colonial, or invasive. And in many cases, that tactic worked. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. The Royal Archive, the confidential, heavily guarded vault of royal documentation, had reportedly begun its own review. Not out of spite, not out of politics, but out of necessity. Because if the succession line was being blurred, if fabricated birth records had been quietly accepted, the monarchy's very legitimacy was at stake. And according to one insider, they found something. A document. A discrepancy. A name on a registry that didn't match. And when King Alaric, the fictional stand-in for our current monarch, saw it, he reportedly said only this. Then it must be done. Quietly. But completely. Which brings us back to the moment the children were stripped of their titles. The palace didn't just react. They had a trigger. And that trigger might have been buried in the very first lie. But we're just getting started. Because the draft press release wasn't the only thing that went missing. There's another witness. One who saw the first baby up close. One who helped stage the first photo shoot. One who later vanished from the royal payroll without a trace. And what she claimed, in a series of encrypted voice notes, might be the key to everything. She wasn't supposed to speak. Her contract made that crystal clear. A lifelong non-disclosure agreement. No interviews. No books. No podcasts. Not even a private diary. But some secrets are too heavy to carry in silence. Her name? Marianne Gellard. A former senior assistant to the royal household's communications division. A woman with no desire for fame, no thirst for scandal. She had served 3 monarchs over a span of 19 years. Sharp, private, respected, and then gone. Quietly removed from the payroll 6 weeks after the first official photograph of baby Alexander was released to the public. No announcement. No thanks. No, leaving to pursue new opportunities. She just vanished. Until now. Because earlier this year, a batch of encrypted voice notes surfaced online, leaked to a whistleblower protection group based in Geneva. The notes were reportedly recorded in 2021, stored on a burner phone, and passed along to a legal contact in the event of Marianne's disappearance or untimely death. She's not dead, by the way. She's just missing. And the contents of those voice notes? They may hold the most explosive clue in the entire saga. Let's walk through what she said, and why the palace allegedly spent years trying to bury it. The first voice note was short, just 37 seconds. But it set the tone. They think because it's digital, they can control the narrative. That if we crop the right angle, delete the right metadata, manipulate the press cycle, they can preserve the illusion. But the illusion is cracking. And the moment they asked me to falsify that timestamp, I knew I had to get out. Let that sink in. Falsify the timestamp. That was her job, to oversee the release and archiving of official royal images. And according to her, she was asked directly to edit the metadata on the first public photo of baby Alexander. Why would the palace care about a photo timestamp? Because that timestamp would have confirmed when, and possibly where, the photo was taken. And according to Marianne, the photo wasn't taken 2 days after the birth, as claimed. It was taken weeks earlier, in a private estate, using a hired infant model from a talent agency. She didn't name names. She didn't speculate why. She simply said this. The baby wasn't theirs. I don't know whose it was, but it wasn't the same baby I saw later, the one they brought to the Jubilee Garden shoot. Different birthmarks, different eyes, different movement. If you asked me under oath, I'd swear they used a stand-in. Now pause. Ask yourself, Why would a palace communications assistant, someone with everything to lose and nothing to gain, fabricate that? She didn't go public. She didn't sell a book. She vanished. But before she did, she left behind a 9-page internal memo marked privileged, not for public release, that has now been leaked to multiple investigative journalists. The memo, dated July 14, 2019, was addressed to Sir Howard Ellington, then Director of Royal Security Protocol, Lady Miriam Stoke, Head of Royal Archival Integrity, and, crucially, HRH Queen Arabella, who was still reigning at the time. Its subject line? Photographic inconsistencies and chain of custody discrepancies. HRH Baby Alexander. That phrase alone tells you everything. Chain of custody discrepancies. It reads more like a police report than a royal memo. Inside the memo, Marianne lays out a timeline of events that conflict directly with the public record. According to her timeline, June 29, 2019, a baby is brought into Eastmere Castle for a private photo session. June 30, 2019, the Duchess is photographed in loose-fitting clothing, not appearing postpartum. July 3, 2019. Public statement declares the baby was born 2 days ago. July 5, 2019. The official photo is released, but metadata shows it was created June 29. Do the math. If the baby was born on July 1st, how could the photo have been taken 2 days earlier? Now here's where it gets spine-tingling. The memo also references a security log entry from the Eastmere Estate Guardhouse. That log shows a licensed talent agency vehicle entering the grounds at 6:42 a.m. on June 29th and leaving 90 minutes later. Guess what that agency specializes in? Infant and toddler photo doubles. Coincidence? Maybe. But the web keeps tightening. Marianne's memo was reportedly submitted to the Royal Integrity Office for private review. But just 3 weeks later, she was placed on indefinite administrative leave. And 6 weeks after that, she disappeared entirely. Her royal-issued email was deactivated. Her ID card no longer worked at the estate gates. Colleagues were told she had resigned due to health concerns. No farewell lunch. No press announcement. Just a vanished voice and a memo buried deep beneath the carpets of the monarchy. But it didn't stay buried. Because someone, no one knows who, leaked the memo to the Royal Security Ethics Board during King Alaric's coronation review. That's when everything changed. You see, the coronation isn't just ceremonial. It's also bureaucratic. Titles get confirmed. Succession lines get re-verified. Archives get reviewed. And when that memo surfaced during the audit, it set off alarms. There were 3 critical findings. The timeline of baby Alexander's public unveiling didn't match internal records. The photographic metadata had clearly been tampered with. A witness, Marianne, had disappeared under suspicious silence. It was enough. Enough to reopen the internal probe. Enough to reconsider title allocations. Enough to trigger the statement you heard in Chapter 1. But here's the part no one expected. The palace never denied the memo. When asked, all they said was, "We do not comment on personnel matters." That silence, that refusal to clarify, that was deafening. And then came the second voice note. This one was longer, shakier. Marianne's voice cracks as she recounts what happened the day she left. They told me I'd be reassigned. Temporarily. Somewhere off record. But when I arrived, there was no assignment. Just a quiet cottage and an NDA on the table. They said if I signed it, I'd receive a pension. If I didn't, well, I wouldn't be returning to Eastmere. She didn't sign it. Instead, she packed her bags and disappeared from public life. No phone, no bank cards, no digital trace. Her last known location was an off-the-grid cabin in the Scottish Highlands, where she stayed with a cousin for 3 months before vanishing again. But her recordings remained, and now they're being dissected by investigative teams, legal analysts, and yes, the palace's own internal committee. Because if even 10% of what she said is true, then the royal story we've been told for 5 years is a carefully controlled illusion, scripted, edited, and projected on a global scale. The kind of illusion that protects not just reputations, but dynasties. So here's the question. If a single aide had the power to shake the monarchy with one memo, who else knew? Who else signed off on the staged photo? Who controlled the flow of metadata? Who ordered the tampering? Because someone inside the palace, someone high up, didn't just approve the deception. They designed it. But the cracks are showing. And the next leak might come from a former palace photographer with an axe to grind and a laptop full of unedited images. When the truth gets uncomfortable, the first instinct isn't always to hide, it's to distract. And Meghan, Duchess of Calderon, didn't just understand that, she weaponized it. From the very beginning of her royal ascent, Meghan controlled the narrative like a seasoned political strategist. Every public appearance, every leaked photo, every emotional interview. Calculated, framed, timed. And when the questions about her children began to swirl, about their births, their lineage, their very existence, her strategy shifted from Hollywood charm to full-blown narrative warfare. This wasn't about privacy. It was about power. Let's break it down. The Duchess's media strategy post-royal exit was built around one central pillar. Victimhood equals visibility. She wasn't just a royal wife. She was a woman of color, a mother, an outsider, a survivor of institutional cruelty, all rolled into one potent media brand. And what better way to shield yourself from scrutiny than to claim every question is an attack? When the whispers about baby Alexander's birth began online, people asking why there were no hospital photos, no interviews with medical staff, no documentation, Meghan's PR team didn't respond with facts. They responded with fury. The narrative became, you're questioning a mother's right to privacy. You're attacking a biracial woman's right to protect her children. This is racism, misogyny, and colonialism rolled into one. It worked. Mainstream outlets backed off. Even tabloids, usually ruthless, grew cautious. Anyone who dared ask basic questions, what hospital was Alexander born in? Or, why haven't the children been seen publicly? Were labeled conspiracy theorists, trolls, or worse. But behind the scenes, a different machine was spinning. Meghan's team was crafting a media cocoon, a carefully curated bubble of imagery and emotion. The couple's multi-million-dollar streaming deal became their digital fortress. And at the center of it, a documentary series called Roots of Royalty, Our Story. Marketed as raw, intimate, and honest, the series promised to show Meghan and her husband as they truly are, parents, partners, people. But when the episodes aired, the emotional music swelled. The lighting was ethereal. The narratives were tight. And yet, something was missing. The children. Yes, baby Alexander and baby Leora made appearances, but only in fragments. Blurred shots, backs of heads, toddler feet running through grass, a hand grabbing a cookie. Never a full-face shot. Never unedited. Never live. Even their voices were mysteriously absent. No giggles. No coos. No tantrums. It was like watching a trailer for a movie that didn't exist. And here's where things take a sharp turn. Multiple camera operators who worked on Roots of Royalty later revealed, anonymously, of course, that NDAs were aggressively enforced, especially during any scenes involving the children. One cameraman reportedly walked off set after being told he couldn't ask what day a certain scene was filmed. Another claimed that Meghan herself reviewed and approved every single shot involving the children, sometimes ordering entire scenes cut if the light on Leora's face wasn't flattering. But insiders say the real reason wasn't lighting. It was inconsistency. Because in at least one leaked production note, allegedly shared between two editors, there's a chilling line. Leora A, Santa Barbara, doesn't match Leora B, Jubilee footage. Hairline and eye spacing inconsistent. Let that sit with you. Two versions of the same child. Now, is it possible the editors were just overanalyzing? Sure. Lighting, age progression, even angles can create visual discrepancies. But this wasn't a Reddit thread. These were professional editors working with high-definition footage and still frame captures. And they were concerned. But instead of investigating further, the production team circled the wagons. Sources say Meghan brought in her own post-production supervisor, a woman who had worked with her on multiple Hollywood projects, to finalize the children's cuts. Everything from color grading to frame duration was run through her. And then, the footage disappeared. That's right. Rough cuts of unreleased scenes were wiped from studio hard drives just weeks after the final episode aired. One producer told a journalist, "It was like the CIA came through. Every file gone. Even the backups." That same producer later quit the company. But the Duchess wasn't done yet. She moved to consolidate her control even further. Using funds from the couple's production company, Meghan launched a parenting podcast, Modern Mothers, aimed at exploring motherhood through a feminist, cultural, and compassionate lens. The early episodes? Empathetic, polished, full of celebrity guests praising Meghan's courage. But every time a guest would veer into specifics, questions about birthing experiences, early motherhood challenges, even sleep schedules, Meghan would redirect the conversation. She always framed her experience in abstract terms. Always, "We felt so blessed," or "There were challenges, but we grew." Never once did she mention the name of a pediatrician. Never a birth date. Never a feeding schedule. Now compare that to other royal mothers. Even the fiercely private Duchess of Alls, who loathed the spotlight, once spoke candidly about teething gels and colic remedies. Meghan? Nothing. And then came the Archwell employee leak. In 2024, a former digital consultant who had worked on the couple's charity website released an anonymous whistleblower report alleging multiple internal edits to birth-related content. According to the leak, the following edits were made under direct instruction from the Duchess's media chief. A blog post about Leora's first steps was pulled within 36 hours of posting. A quote referencing Alexander's preschool was rewritten to remove the location. A timeline graphic showing our family's milestones was deleted entirely. Why? Because the details didn't line up. At one point, the site claimed Leora had turned 1 in March. Another post celebrated her first birthday in May. Yet her official birth date, according to press releases, was in April. Even a casual observer could spot the contradiction. But the posts were scrubbed, cached versions disappeared, and anyone asking questions on Archwell's forums was blocked. It all points to one thing: narrative control through digital erasure. Meghan's team had learned the modern game: own the story or be destroyed by it. They knew that the moment inconsistencies became patterns, questions would turn into investigations. So they tightened the noose, locked the files, controlled the visuals, branded every critic as toxic. And it worked for a while. But then came the lawsuits. 3 independent investigative journalists, each working on separate exposés about inconsistencies in royal lineage, were hit with cease and desist letters from Meghan's legal team. One of them, a Pulitzer nominee named Clara Vey, claimed her home was visited by a reputation management team affiliated with an American agency hired by Archwell. Another, a British historian, had her Twitter account permanently suspended after a targeted defamation campaign labeled her research as racially motivated. None of these critics had published hate. They had asked questions. That's it. But Meghan's media machine was already in overdrive. Every appearance was timed. Every narrative controlled. She wasn't just trying to shield her children. She was shielding a secret. One that could unravel the entire brand she and her husband had spent years building. And if whispers from inside the Archwell office are to be believed, the dam is cracking. Because someone on the inside, someone close to the Duchess, may have kept copies, photos, emails, metadata. And that person? They've reportedly reached out to a former Netflix cameraman, the very one who walked off set during the Leora's birthday shoot. If that footage is real, if it shows what some claim it shows, then Meghan's media machine won't just lose control. It will implode. What's the one thing Meghan's entire media machine could never outrun? Cold, clinical, scientific proof. And that is exactly what the palace quietly, secretly, finally demanded. But before we get to the moment the DNA request was delivered, you have to understand something crucial. This was not an emotional decision. This was not a family squabble. This was constitutional warfare. And DNA was the palace's nuclear option. The first whisper of a lineage test didn't come from King Alaric. It didn't come from the Queen before him. It didn't even come from the Royal Integrity Office. It came from someone no one expected. Lord Percival Ashcombe, the royal archivist, a man so private that the public has only seen him twice in 30 years. The keeper of records, the guardian of cross-generational lineage, the man who knows, better than anyone, what happens when a royal birth isn't what it seems. And according to multiple sources inside the royal household, Lord Percival was the one who raised the alarm. There are inconsistencies in the line of succession files. We cannot certify the legitimacy of the Calderon children without verification. Those words, carefully chosen, landed like a grenade on the king's desk. Why? Because legitimacy verification in royal protocol has only meant one thing for the past 200 years. DNA, not rumors, not photos, not storytelling. Biological verification. Meghan's carefully curated bubble was about to burst. Let's break down how it happened, step by explosive step. The internal meeting that changed everything. It was a Thursday morning. Rain beat against the palace windows. Only 4 people were called into the private council chamber. King Alaric, Lord Percival Ashcombe, Sir Howard Ellington, Royal Security, Lady Miriam Stoke, Archival Integrity. This was not a planning meeting. This was not a discussion. This was an intervention. Percival laid out the discrepancies. A christening certificate missing signatures. A birth registry entry submitted digitally, not physically. Metadata inconsistencies in archival photographs. Conflicting dates in internal milestone reports. A witness ledger missing names of medical staff. But the final blow? A sealed letter from the late Queen Arabella, written the year before her death. The letter reportedly contained just 3 lines. If ever doubt eclipses certainty regarding the Calderon lineage, the truth must be pursued. Without truth, succession collapses. Protect the crown. That was it. No elaboration. No commentary. Just the Queen's final instruction. Seek the truth, no matter the fallout. And that meant DNA. Why DNA matters more than anything else. In a normal family, DNA tests are a personal matter. Not here. For royalty, DNA determines succession, titles, diplomatic relations, security rights, royal funding, constitutional stability. If a child in the royal line is misidentified, intentionally or inadvertently, it could unravel centuries of legal precedent. Nations have gone to war for less. And the palace wasn't about to risk a global scandal over a couple who had already proven they were unpredictable. The delivery of the demand. The request had to be handled with surgical precision. No accusations, no drama, no leaks. Just a formal, respectful, airtight document presented in a sealed envelope. And the person chosen to deliver it? Sir Howard Ellington, the same man who oversees all royal security and compliance matters. A man who sees through every lie. A man who knows when someone's hiding something. A man Meghan reportedly despised. He arrived at the Calderon's Monte Miramar residence unannounced. No photographers, no entourage, just a single black car and a folder in his hand. And according to an insider, a house staff member who later resigned, Meghan saw him through the kitchen window and immediately froze. She whispered, "Why is he here?" Sir Howard was invited inside. The Duke joined them. Meghan remained standing, arms crossed, jaw tight. Howard placed the envelope on the table. Their Majesties request lineage confirmation for Alexander and Leora Calderon. Standard procedure. Discreet. Private. Routine. Routine? Not even close. Meghan exploded. According to the staff witness, she slammed her hand on the counter and snapped. Absolutely not. You have no right. No jurisdiction. We are private citizens. But Howard stayed calm. He repeated, "This is not a request for you. This is a request for the crown." The Duke, usually composed, looked shaken. He reportedly asked, "Is this necessary? Why now?" And Howard's answer, "Because questions have become risks. This is the only way forward." Meghan snatched the envelope off the table and tore it open. Her eyes scanned the document. Her breathing grew sharp. And then, the witness said, she whispered something chilling. If they want war, they'll get war. How the DNA demand leaked. Here's where it gets twisted. The palace never intended the DNA request to go public. But Meghan's team? They had other plans. Within 48 hours, 3 American tabloids received anonymous tips that the palace was racially profiling the Calderon children. Another outlet received a claim that the king demanded genetic obedience. Clearly fabricated, clearly a distraction, but effective. Suddenly, the public conversation shifted from, "Why won't they take the test?" to, "How dare the palace question biracial children?" A genius move, a manipulative one, a calculated one, and it bought Meghan time. But not enough, because someone else leaked the real story. A palace insider, believed to be connected to the royal archive, sent an encrypted message to a journalist. The request is not racial. It is procedural. The inconsistencies are real. More will come. This was the leak that changed everything. Suddenly, major papers weren't ignoring the story. They were digging into it. Documentarians started requesting interviews. Lawyers began weighing in on succession law. Royal historians demanded transparency. The pressure was building. And Meghan? She was cornered. Harry's breaking point. The Duke, once the monarchy's golden child, now found himself trapped between two forces. His wife and his birthright. He reportedly pleaded with Meghan in private. Just take the test. Put this to rest. Her answer? A cold, flat. No. Not I can't. Not I shouldn't. Just no. The Duke, sources say, was devastated. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that Meghan wasn't protecting the children. She was protecting the narrative. And that realization broke something in him. He withdrew, became quiet, detached. One staff member described him as a man watching his life burn down in front of him, but pretending he couldn't smell the smoke. The palace's deadline. 3 weeks after the initial request, the palace sent a follow-up letter. If lineage verification is not provided voluntarily, titles and privileges will be reviewed and may be rescinded. This was not a threat. This was a countdown. And Meghan knew it. Her lawyers threatened lawsuits. Her PR team crafted hit pieces. Her podcast released a special episode about the trauma of institutionalized family control. But the clock kept ticking. And when the deadline hit, the palace acted. Swiftly, silently, completely. Titles revoked. Privileges rescinded. Succession updated. Records amended. No DNA. No titles. Simple. Except nothing about what came next would be simple. Because in the days after the stripping of titles, a new whistleblower emerged. Not from the palace. Not from the archive. But from someone shockingly close to Meghan herself. A member of her personal medical team. And what that person revealed would ignite the biggest royal scandal of the century. Sometimes, warnings don't come as alarms. They come as whispers, as subtle gestures, as carefully chosen words laced with centuries of meaning. And in the case of this royal scandal, the unraveling of lineage, the stripping of titles, the cold fury behind palace doors, the first real warning came from the most underestimated member of the royal family. Princess Adrielle, the king's only sister. Stoic, sharp-tongued, iron-willed, the one person who had always walked just outside the spotlight, but never once lost sight of the truth. She was called the quiet sentinel by palace staff, the one who saw everything, but said nothing until now. And when she finally spoke, it wasn't through a press statement. It wasn't through a documentary. It was through a letter, handwritten, elegant, impossibly precise. A letter that, by design, never used Meghan's name, never mentioned the children, and never even directly referenced the scandal. But make no mistake, every word was a scalpel. Every sentence, a coded dagger. Every paragraph, a veiled revelation. The letter that shook the inner circle, dated 2 months before King Alaric issued the formal revocation of titles. The letter was addressed privately to him. It was delivered not by royal courier, but by Adrielle's personal equerry, a move that immediately signaled urgency. Only a handful of staff ever saw the letter, and they all described its contents the same way. Icy, devastating, impossible to ignore. The letter began with a gentle callback to their childhood, a memory of hiding under the grand piano in the red drawing room as children, eavesdropping on their father's meetings. But then, the tone shifted, gracefully, but unmistakably. I write not as your sister, but as a steward of something older than either of us. The bloodline is not ceremony. It is continuity. And continuity, once ruptured, cannot be mended with sentiment. Right there. That line. It set the tone for the entire letter. Adrielle wasn't pleading. She wasn't warning. She was commanding, the way only someone born with noble steel in her bones could. Deconstructing the code. Every sentence in the letter was laced with subtle references to royal protocol, historical precedent, and constitutional consequence. Take this line. We have inherited not a crown, but a contract, with history, with heritage, with the unseen weight of centuries. She was reminding her brother, and by extension, the entire royal establishment, that their roles weren't about emotion or optics or popularity. They were about truth. Then came the veiled strike. If a branch of the tree bears fruit without seed, it is not to be celebrated. It is to be pruned. What sounds like poetry was a surgical bomb. Fruit without seed, a reference, scholars now believe, to children whose lineage cannot be verified. And pruned, a metaphor for removal, clean, necessary, unsentimental. In palace terms, this wasn't just strong language. It was the equivalent of shouting from the throne room. A history of coded communication. Princess Adrielle had done this before. During the infamous Archivale scandal, when a distant cousin attempted to claim a forgotten title based on forged documents, Adrielle sent a similarly coded letter to the Lord Chancellor. That letter contained the now legendary line, "A crown worn on lies turns to ash at coronation." It became the internal motto used to shut down the claim. And now, years later, Adrielle was invoking the same logic. But this time, the target wasn't a distant cousin. It was her own nephew, her brother's children, her family, or, at least, the people claiming to be. Why Adrielle mattered? You might wonder, why would a single letter matter so much? Because Adrielle isn't just the king's sister. She's the head of the Order of Continuity, a secretive royal body tasked with advising the monarch on succession, legitimacy, and historical precedent. A role dating back to the 1400s. A role that, while ceremonial on the surface, holds enormous symbolic power behind closed doors. And Adrielle had never once interfered in a family scandal. Not during divorces. Not during affairs. Not even during Meghan and her husband's original departure. But this was different. Because this wasn't scandal. This was succession. The letter leaks, intentionally. What's fascinating is what happened next. The letter, originally private, somehow ended up quoted verbatim in an obscure legal journal dedicated to royal hereditary law. An academic publication read only by experts, but archived publicly online. Coincidence? Doubtful. The journal was known to receive quiet briefings from palace aides when they wanted to test legal language in the court of public opinion. And once the letter's quotes hit the public archive, the reaction was immediate. Constitutional lawyers took notice. Political commentators dissected every phrase. Historian forums lit up with speculation. Suddenly, what was once a hidden warning became an open question. Was Princess Adrielle implying the Calderon children were not legitimate? And if so, why wasn't the palace responding? The pressure was back on. The king, now surrounded by experts quoting his own sister back at him, realized something chilling. If he didn't act, Adrielle's letter might become a formal challenge. The family fallout. Inside the palace, the fallout was brutal. According to one senior footman, a private confrontation took place between the king and Adrielle just days after the letter went public. He reportedly asked, "Do you not trust me to protect the crown?" Her answer? "I trust you to love your son. I don't trust you to betray the truth for him." It was the first time in recorded history that a senior royal openly questioned the king's integrity, face to face. But she didn't stop there. At a royal charity event the following week, Adrielle delivered a speech to a crowd of scholars, dropping one last breadcrumb. We must never confuse affection for clarity. A story is not sacred simply because it comforts us. Inheritance, like identity, must be earned through truth. The message couldn't have been clearer. She was drawing the line in public. She was daring the king, either act or be exposed. The final straw, a private intelligence briefing. Shortly after Adrielle's second public statement, the king reportedly received a sealed dossier from the Royal Intelligence Liaison, a summary of quiet investigations surrounding the Calderon children's birth documentation. That dossier included testimony from a now-retired pediatrician, a timeline of falsified social media metadata, financial records from a surrogate agency under investigation, photos taken on the day of baby Leora's birth, none showing Meghan anywhere near the hospital. It was enough. More than enough. And that's when the king made the decision. He would issue the statement, strip the titles, rewrite the line, clean the record, but not out of vengeance. Out of duty. Adrielle's final words to her brother. Sources say that before the king signed the final document revoking the Calderon children's royal status, Adrielle requested one last private audience. They met in the Queen's garden. No staff, no recording devices, just brother and sister, monarch and sentinel. What was said will likely never be known. But according to the gardener, the only person within earshot, Adrielle said one thing before walking away. Let truth be the legacy, not the lie. Cliffhanger. But Adriel wasn't the only one who had been quietly watching. Because weeks before the titles were stripped, and days after the king received that intelligence file, an anonymous source sent a locked hard drive to a freelance journalist in Sydney. The return address? Non-existent. The contents? Encrypted footage from inside the Calderon estate. Raw, unedited, time-stamped. And what's on that footage? Could destroy everything.